Welcome back to the shop, everyone. Today I'm cutting the lock bars on a frame lock and a liner lock, prepping and cutting handle material for the liner lock, and now I'm getting ready to drill the holes for the front side of the bolsters. I've got the back side done, and now it's time to drill through to catch the front sides. This is a two-piece style bolster and some micarta. It looks kind of ugly right now, but it'll show up. It's just needs to be finished, sanded, and all that good stuff. So pretty busy. Finally getting over this terrible cold I had, and it's been a rough one. And hopefully no more mishaps in the shop this week. But I ran across something while I was looking for bolster material. I was looking for some carbon fiber I had, and I ran across a box and found some things in there I thought you might be interested to look at. Something that I rarely show people, but these are some of them over 30 years old, and one of them is my very first knife that I can remember making, and a few thereafter. There's probably 30 in that box, and you know, things that just never would leave my shop. It was probably 4 years before I started even trying to sell a knife. I gave a few away, but it just wasn't up to standard in my opinion, and they're still in the box. They're in rough shape, but I just thought I'd show them to you. First one is the very first knife I can remember making. This is it right here. It was made from a piece of leaf spring. It is like 3/8 thick, gigantic. Had some oak handles, some stainless pins. Check out the grind on that. I done that on a 3-inch wheel, or 2 or 3-inch wheel, on an old Craftsman flat sander. It's hollow ground. I did it on the wheel. And thereafter, I spent a lot of time learning how to hollow grind. Eventually, I got a 2x72 grinder. It was an old coupe style grinder, very limited on what you could do with it. You know, you could either flat grind or hollow grind. You couldn't do any kind of accessory work, and small wheels, and no tilting features, and just a lot you couldn't do with it, which limits your ability, limited mine. But very crude and rude, something that I would not show to people, and quite frankly, not very functional. Then I moved on. I made several knives out of files. This one, the handle's missing on one side, but another non-useful knife. I was young and just playing, and you know, not really thinking about ergonomics and functionality and all that in a knife. Again, that one's hollow grind the same way, on the same wheel. Pretty rough. Then I moved on to some different styles. This is a brazed guard. It is completely brazed on. Very hard to control heat and ruining your temper. Kind of a Skinner stylish thing. It's rough, as you can see, just rough. It is flat ground, by the way. And it was made, I think, out of some 1095. I can't remember, but the brazing technique I learned from a maker who wrote a book back then. I'm not gonna call his name, but I don't recommend making knives that way, but I did. I made several that way and eventually got away from it. And then I learned how to solder guards, and eventually do very good friction fits, press fits on guards. Here's another one in the same style. Very kind of ugly, but looks like a broke humpback whale, but this was supposed to be a hollow ground Skinner. You know, the whole time I'm learning, and it's just heavy and just not very functional. Again, brazed guard. Here's another one with a brazed guard, and notice the bent blade. I was doing some testing with it, and not very good, a little too soft, which is another reason why I spent so many years learning till I could get proper heat treating on a knife before I sold it or tried to sell it. And I wanted to make the best knife I could. And so I did do a lot of testing on my knives and was quite frustrated at times, but this one probably got soft due to me not controlling the heat in here. But again, at this time, I really didn't know what I was doing heat treating. And we didn't have nothing really online to help us at all. I mean, it's somebody you knew, you talked to or met somewhere. There wasn't YouTube and online forums. They had just started kicking one off later on, but not really anything to help you unless you knew somebody or went somewhere and learned, which I eventually did. Here's another one, a Tanto style, also with brazed guard and brazed bolster. A hollow ground Tanto. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. And another kind of swept up looking, whatever kind of knife. It'll cut, but can't guarantee the heat treatment. This one is hollow ground as well. And this one was after I've got the coot grinder, the hollow grind is. Brazed bolsters, some oddball looking thing. And then I made several of this style. These are pinned bolsters. I'd started learning how to do that. And just some skinners, but really not up to any good standards. They fit okay in a hand. You'll see a lot of these style today even. I made a lot of knives with different patterns, and there's probably 15, 20 more in that box. But I thought you'd like to see something like that. First knife, and you just stay with it, stick with it, and you'll get over stuff like this. But I keep them. It's just to remind me. And I think that's important, is to learn from your old mistakes and where you came from, and have somebody to look up to, have mentors. Because I do, I have mentors that I look up to and learn from, and I spent many years doing that. Anyway, thought you might like that. Let's get back on to making these folders. I'm gonna get these drilled out, then I'm gonna come in here and counterbore, over drilled for the pass through on 256 screws, and do the counterbores, tap these liners, and I'll do the final profiles on them. All right, now I got the pass-through holes done. I'm going to take a counterbore for a 256 head screw and come down about 60 thousandths. That way I can go ahead and screw them to the liners. Of course, I need to thread the liners, but I need to get this done. And I just set up here in my mill. Nothing fancy. I'm going to be using my DRO. I'll come in here and set 0 first to find out where to start. I get the counterbore in there like that. It's bottomed out. I'm just going to lock my quill there, set it at 0, and then I'll go down 60 thousandths. And we can get this thing started. All right, with the liners all tapped, I can now go over to one of my disc sanders outside and trim all these at one time. I'll trim all the screws at one time where they're flush with the liner. I just run up to the disc sander, bump it a little bit. They're not too long where I have to cut them. They're just slightly through. Get that done, then I'm going to bolt them together to the frame, to the back spacers, and I'm going to go ahead and profile it. Get a good clean profile there, and then I can start working on releasing the lock bar and doing all that fun stuff. They're looking pretty good. They're gonna look great, I think. It's a better shot. Once this is all cleaned up and the true colors come out, it's gonna be several tones because it's a layered micarta. I think it's called Mirage, from my buddy over at Freedom Forge Tactical. He supplied these scales on the micarta. I had this carbon fiber laying around. Get these trimmed up. All right, moving right on along here. Now what I want to do is cut the pocket for the pivot head to fit into, where it'll be recessed in there but hidden. And I've already cut this one. I got the next one set up in the mill, and I'm just going to be plunge cutting with an end mill. I've already got the center marked, and I will go ahead and just plunge cut it to the depth I need. Nothing fancy here. You could do this on a drill press if you get it clamped down right. Like I said, nothing fancy here. And that'll do it. So right now I'm set up to cut a taper on the handle material to allow the lock bar to move over into it, give it some room to move. If you don't, you'll just have it in a bind when you try to open it. You have to give some relief in there for the lock bar because the detent is going to push it over. What I've got here will give a machinist nightmares. But what I do is I build stuff and try it out, and if it works, then I'll try to make it better. And I've cut about 6 or 8 handles on here, and I found the problems and things that I need to fix. For one, it's a thin piece of angle iron, and it really needs to be something with more surface material, wider, gripped in the vise, and that way there's no vibration. I got a makeshift jack here. I've got a machinist jack, but it's too tall, and so I need some thicker material here, and then a little bit better made. Have a better fixture plate for clamping and that sort of thing. I got several holes tapped here to hold it down, and it's pretty sketchy looking. And to explain what I've got here, I've got this angle and some holes here to clamp it, and I want to touch off at the end of the lock bar and move all the way up to where it stops, and I'm going to taper it down to about 18 thousandths. And so what I've done is I've set up a gauge in here to measure the distance to give me about 18 thousandths here. I'll touch off and cut in to give me about 18 thousandths, and I'll mill this away. That should give us clearance. So I've got this tilted up to do that. And I just use a machinist gauge to measure it with, and that works okay. But I will build something better. It's just what I'm using right now. I've always done it crazy ways. I mean, originally I done it with a Dremel, but I've clamped them into vise and just angled them and braced them and done it. But that's, you're putting pressure on your scales, just not good. So I've got something here, and it works for now till I redo it and make it better, which it has to be better. Now, Pop sells some clamps, and there's a couple others out there that you can clamp scales in for drilling holes that I'm sure you can modify to use to do this task. And I just don't have one, but I may make one like that. But I'm sure it can be used for that. So I'm gonna touch off here and cut all the way back down to the end. Let's see what we got here. About 2. Get my 0 on this thing. About 239. 224. It's about 15 thousandths. That should be enough. It's close enough, I think. Well, I'm gonna put it on here so we can take a look at it. Get it over where you can see it. Don't know if you can see that. Yes. Again, I'm sorry about my camera, but that's what we want. Now what I'm gonna do is go ahead and lay out our detent, drill it, and bend the lock bar, and we can start on cutting the lock face on the blade. I've still got to cut the relief on the Framelock folder. I've got it set up in the mill, and I have to cut the relief on the spring. And then we can do the same thing to the Framelock. So we'll get this going. You wouldn't believe that last week it was 9 degrees here, and today it's about 74 out there. Now we do have some stormy weather coming in, but just shows you how crazy the weather is in South Louisiana. And that's just the way it goes. I'm going to set me a mark here, and I use around 50 thousandths to do that, where I want to drill my detent. I need to be putting my glasses on. I can't even see what I'm doing here. I'll get it close enough, I think. So I've got a mark there, 50 thousandths from each edge, and I'm going to center punch it, put it together, and we're going to drill our detent. right, now I'm gonna go ahead and mark the lock face to cut the lock face. And I've just got it blued in there, just some blue marker. And what I like to do is fully assemble it. You know, it doesn't have to have the handles, but make sure the frame is right, everything's tuned and working right, and then mark it. Because if you do this just on the half frame, you don't always get accurate mark, and you can be off, because once you bolt these together, it can change things. It can change the geometry a little bit. So I'm going to take a razor, come in here, and right up against the lock bar, mark it several times, make sure I get a good mark using a razor, and I should have what I need there. And I'm holding it open down here like this. You don't want it to be loose and make that mark. Make sure you're putting pressure on it, keep it open. And I'll take it apart and we'll get over to the grinder, and I'm gonna cut that lock face on 7.5 degrees. Now what I'm gonna do, since I've got the lock up, I'm gonna come in here where this bearing tracks all the way around and comes off the lock face, and I'm gonna put a ramp there. And this will give that ball bearing a smooth transition. When you're opening and closing it, it doesn't catch on the ball right there on that sharp corner. It really makes it smooth, and it'll set it apart from your norm. But you gotta be very careful. I'm using a 1/8 carbide burr. You can use a little smaller. And I'm just gonna make a gentle ramp, try to stay off of the lock face, and just catch it where the track is. And what this will do is let that ball come in there, slowly come off of there. And when you go to close it or open it up, or when you go to close it, it won't bite here. And it just makes a real nice transition there. That looks pretty good. I might hit it one more time. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Just a little ramp there where that ball can come off. It makes it a very smooth operation when you're opening and closing it. All right, I got it fully assembled, and here in the light where you can hopefully see what I'm talking about. All right, when it's fully open and I go to close it, you can see that bar moving, ball riding up and down that little ramp. It doesn't snag. Makes it very nice. Just falls right off of there. Now with that work done, it's time to grind the blade and shape the handle. I'll have some embellishment work to do and all that stuff, but I'm gonna put this down a minute and drop back on the frame lock, and I've got to relieve the lock bar, that area right in here where it'll bend. I've got to cut about 112 thousandths off of it. I'll be using a ball end mill to do that, 5/16, and cut that out. Then we'll get that one up to the same state, and then we can finish both of them out. right, we got this one locked up, working just fine. Now it's time to start grinding the blades and getting the profiles done. Of course, I got a good bit of little fine detail work, some file work and all that I'm going to do, and all of the etching and anodizing that'll be done on both the frame lock and the liner lock. But we're going to have to do that in the next episode because we're out of time. I hope you got something out of another day in the shop. I want to thank my patrons, and I want to thank you for watching. We're going to see you on the next one.